I'm Marissa Semkiw in for Michael Corin. This week, Canada witnessed the first post-9/11 acts of terrorism on Canadian soil. There have been attempts since the world changed on that September morning to attack Canada. There was the Toronto 18 plot in 2006 to storm Parliament and behead our Prime Minister. There was the plot by two Muslim men to blow up a Via Rail passenger train in 2013 that runs between Toronto and New York City. There have been others that a large portion of Canada's population have likely never heard of. So it doesn't come as much of a surprise that there would be continued attempts to undermine Canada's peace and security, to rock our very foundation. Now, in light of this week's terrorist attacks, there are many questions to consider. How were these guys radicalized? How does someone grow up in Canada with the full advantages that our strong and free country offers fall into such a mindset? Who did they associate with? What about the 90 or so individuals who currently remain on the RCMP's watch list? Should they be rounded up? Is there enough information to charge and convict them? We now know that Michael Sahaf-Bibeau was known to police and that Martin Rouleau was on that list, that RCMP list, and had his passport revoked. Was this the right decision? These are all the questions that come to mind that we'll be answering throughout the show as we look ahead to our new reality that the country woke up to this morning. But to start, I want to address this deranged lone wolf narrative that we keep hearing. In the last 24 hours, I've heard politicians, media pundits cling to any euphemism they can think of to avoid calling this what it is, which is Islamic terrorism. Sahaf-Bibeau has been called a criminal, mentally ill, a lone wolf. But what about a terrorist? Though we hate to admit it, religion undeniably plays a role. Moreover, ISIS didn't have to orchestrate a sophisticated master plan for this to be true. ISIS has a tremendous ideological appeal, largely a result of its victories overseas, that they're getting individuals in Western societies to act on their own. Even if the terrorist is any of these euphemisms that they like to use in the faculty lounges, we cannot escape the reality that religion, ideology, and dogma are to blame for the radicalization and acts themselves. Islamic terrorism is the threat, and we gain nothing by pretending otherwise. Side conversations and red herrings to avoid using the T word might make us feel better, more open-minded, accepting, liberal. But with that mindset, we will never address the continued threat to our way of life, our freedom, our very democracy, which is why they hate us. Let's remain focused on the problem. Let's work with international partners, our allies whom we defeated Nazism with, to defeat the greatest threat to our humanity. Let's call it what it is. Political correctness should not distract from the challenges that we face. Western democracies have protected rights and freedoms for so many who hadn't had them. We've done it before, and we can do it again. Prime Minister Stephen Harper then went on to shake the hand of the NDP leader Thomas Mulcair. We have a leader who today not only put political correctness aside, but also checked partisanship on the floor of a rambunctious House of Commons where he embraced his two political opponents. This is not a time for politics, political correctness, or dogmatic thinking. It is a time for action. This is our mission, and we will not back down.
Canada will never be intimidated. In fact, this will lead us to strengthen our resolve and redouble our efforts, and those of our national security agencies, to take all necessary steps to identify and counter threats and keep Canada safe here at home.
People look at what happened in Quebec 2 days ago, and many people, I'm sure many people in this country sat back and went, oh, here's a guy who's got a mental health issue, sure. and he was following ISIS on the internet, and he went out on his own as a solo lone wolf and did this. And then today we're having a different think about all of that.
After the terrorist attack in Ottawa yesterday, some people have been referring to this as an issue of mental health, as opposed to an issue of terrorism. John Robson joins us from Ottawa to help clarify. John, what do you make of this distinction, that this is somehow an issue having to do with mental health? Do you think it sort of diminishes the role or the threat that's out there?
I think really it's a red herring. I mean, it suggests that there are two kinds of terrorists, you know, the ones who are calmly and rationally going around beheading people, slaughtering innocents, blowing things up, repressing women, and then the weirdos. And we really don't have to worry about the weirdos. You know, it makes me think about, think about the Nazis, think about Adolf Hitler. You say, well, you don't have to worry about Hitler because he's crazy. You know, you only have to worry about the sane ones. There is a certain personality type that is attracted to radicalism. And writing in the Ottawa Citizen yesterday morning, before the shooting, but talking about the guy who'd run down two soldiers and killed one, Michael Dentant in the Ottawa Citizen said, one can debate whether he is a real terrorist, a crazed wannabe, or a troubled young man. I think it's a false distinction. He's all those things, because it is these kind of alienated people who cannot cope with the pressures of a free society, who snap under the strain of trying to make their own way, who are attracted to radical movements. And it's a crazy act to become a Nazi. It's a crazy act to become a Bolshevik. It's a crazy act to become an Islamist. They're all weirdos. And the question is, what do we do about these people wanting us dead? If you can discourage radicalization, if you can identify a profile, that's fine. But to go around saying, oh, well, the guy who shoots a soldier and tries to get into Parliament and shoot MPs and is weird, we don't have to worry about. We only have to worry about the ones who are ordinary who do that. Ordinary people don't do that kind of thing. And I very much want to recommend, there's a little book called The True Believer by Eric Hoffer. He was an eccentric longshoreman. He was writing about the rise of totalitarianism and talking about the profile, the kind of persons. He once said that belief in a cause can be a substitute for belief in oneself. And this is perfectly normal. In fact, Hitler himself, he was talking about the communists and their techniques, the mass marches and so on. And he said, a mass demonstration has to burn into the soul of the little man that although he is just a worm, he's part of a great dragon. You know, and Hitler himself adopted this technique, and that's the psychological relief that radicalism gives to these people. So it is the people who think they're worms who are attracted to becoming part of this inexorable, powerful dragon, everything they're not in real life.
I don't disagree, but why is it? You know, I'm reminded of Barack Obama referring to the Fort Hood shooting as workplace violence, or, you know, this aversion to refer to the Boston bombers as Islamists. Why do you think there is this sort of, you know, whatever it is in society, call it moral relativism, a refusal to acknowledge the role of religion in this?
Well, I think there's this incredibly strong tendency to think ideas don't matter. And, you know, having talked about the general factors that go into radicalization, it matters what ideology somebody adopts. You know, Michael Dentant says, was he a troubled young man who might have found some other outlet for his sociopathy if Islamism hadn't come along at precisely the wrong time? And the answer is probably yes. And he would probably have picked something else murderous. But there was a conference once on Stalinism where the explanations got so exotic about its origins that one of the participants had to say, hey, it didn't come from Buddhism. It came from Marxism, and it had a particular form of expression. Stalin, his mass murders, the millions he killed, he was trying to wipe out the middle class because he was a Marxist. The Islamists have a particular vision where all infidels must be converted, enslaved, or killed. So once someone adopts this, for whatever reason, it has this particular expression. And again, don't forget Osama bin Laden himself, who was the heir to a very large fortune. He was a notorious party animal in the nightclubs of Beirut before he converted. But once he converted, that he was trying to lose himself in hedonism, and then he tried to lose himself in this cold, narrow fanaticism of Islamism. He then tried to kill infidels and Jews and Americans and Canadians. They were certainly on the Al-Qaeda list, because the ideas do matter. And to pretend that, as you say, the Fort Hood shooting, when he's shouting Allahu Akbar and gunning down infidels, to refuse to admit that there might be some connection with that R word is absurd. It is a failure to grasp the nature of the threat. But again, you find this people consistently denied that the Soviets were communists, including, you know, Franklin Roosevelt at one point. Ideas matter.
You know, rather than talking about feelings and sending these guys to a therapist, we should probably just lock them up in prison for the rest of their lives. But John, that's all the time we have. Thank you.
Thank you.